Hi there.
Hello.
Commission staff is working to conduct our civic engagement programs and processes in a transparent manner, and to make these meetings are to help make commissioners aware of what our programs are and residents as well, and to make decisions collaboratively with commissioners and residents about the design of these programs. And you'll be hearing specific examples of just how we're doing that, how we're gathering feedback in our decision making. And for those who are not familiar with the public meeting context, they're a really great way to learn about the work of government and what we are doing to promote more inclusive participation, to strengthen trust between New Yorkers and government. So just wanted to put that reminder in there. And also wanted to share that I was just in a conference earlier this week at the Interfaith Center of New York, where the theme was faith and democracy. And I had the privilege of doing the keynote address there. And what I wanted to bring to this conversation today is the biggest takeaway for me was the importance of the present moment, right? We were in a spiritual space, so you have different people talking about how faith talks about the importance of being present and how it applies to democracy. Right? Because we are always becoming as a nation, and it's a moment to moment thing. And democracy changes over time. And we can imagine a future for our democracy, and yet the only thing we have is the present. So change is always happening in the present. And just like life is not guaranteed, democracy isn't guaranteed. And so that brings me back to just the gratitude again, right? Gratitude to everyone who's here. Again, whether you're watching this online now, whether you might watch it later, because you are and we are all part of co-creating a democracy that looks more transparent, more inclusive, more accountable to the public. That's what we're doing here today. And that's my way of also extending an invite to people to come and join us for future public meetings, right? And not just for our commission, also for other public meetings. We'll hear later about meetings that'll happen for the racial equity plan, right? It's very important for us to all collectively participate in these moments, because this is how we make democracy, one of the ways we make democracy alive and living and breathing. It's by being there and showing up. So for people who, we always encourage people to sign up for our mailing list to stay connected, and you can go to nyc.gov/civic engagement. you could go to the tab that says Get Involved, and you'll see a link to or a opportunity, a sign up form for the newsletter. So we have traditionally reserved the last 30 minutes of this meeting for members of the public to comment. We may need to condense that today because we started a little bit late. You can sign up to comment. If you're here and you're a member of the public, you can sign up to comment until 12. And if you're a member of the press, you can also share your information on the sign-in sheet. So I'm grateful to all the commissioners who are here in person. We have a couple of commissioners online as well. So I'll take attendance and we have an in-person quorum, which is fantastic. So let me take attendance and then we can get started. Murad Awade.
Here.
Giovanni Barcinis.
Here.
Eve Barron.
Here.
Holly Bonner. I know she's absent. Amy Breedlove.
Here online.
Great. Natalie DeVito.
Here.
Great. Mark Diller.
Good morning, I'm here.
Donna Gill.
Here.
Anthony Harmon. Ishrat Jahan.
Here.
Edwin Maxwell.
Here.
Lillian Perez.
Here. Good morning.
Morning. And Mitch Wu. Okay. And for the record, my name is Dr. Sarah Said, and I'm one of the commissioners appointed to the Civic Engagement Commission, and I'm the chair and executive director. In our last meeting, our major accomplishment together was to review and vote on the submission of the annual report. So thank you again for taking the time to read the annual report and give us feedback. After the vote that we took, we updated the report, and with your permission, added with your recommended changes. We did submit it to the mayor and the city council, and it's also posted on our .gov site, and we promoted it online. So in today's meeting, we're going to be talking about updates to our voter language assistance methodology, racial equity planning, as well as updates to our programs. And there was a resident who signed up for public comment, so we'll hear from that person later in the meeting. So just to get us started, would like to begin by approving the meeting minutes from the last meeting from September.
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any? Okay. Hearing no, any abstentions? I realize I should be asking that. Any abstentions? Okay, so the meeting minutes have been unanimously approved by the commissioners present today. All right, next we will vote on the turn to the voter language assistance methodology. And we did share with the commissioners the updated methodology resolution. So I'd like to invite Anila Kobo to just come up, and I can walk through the updates in case there are questions, if that's okay. Yeah. So as you may recall, this voter language assistance methodology was product of a public hearing. And we must, at each time we put any updates to it, we do need to bring it to the commissioners and to the public and share the updates we've been making. So what we are doing today is updating the numbers of, okay, this doesn't look like it is, it looks like it's the resolution with the changes accepted that's in the packet. So I don't know if anyone has the other one in hand. You do have it with you.
I have it.
Okay. So can you help me with explaining just some of the changes? I will ask your help for your help. So basically, what we are doing is number 7 is titled as polling place allotment, and what this does is that it takes looks at the number of polling places that will receive oral language assistance services. And it looks at the percent, the language shares total of population, citizens of voting age. And it looks at the program eligible jurisdictions, right? And each program eligible language percentage share of the total number of polling places is listed in the table in item number 7 of the methodology. So what has happened in this particular round is that every year we use a different data set, right? There is the ACS 5-year data set that is a compilation of 5 years, and that data set gets updated each year because there's a new 5-year configuration. All right. So in this particular configuration, this is 2017 to 2021. Is that right, Anila?
Yeah.
And we're updating it to the next 5, or is this the update?
No, it's, so the existing one in the methodology is the data set for, based on the American Community Survey data, the 5-year set for 2016 through 2020. And the new data set we're adopting now is the new 5-year for 2017 through 2021.
Okay. So what has happened is that there have been some slight changes on the percentages, but overall not major shifts, right? So yeah.
So what we're seeing here, comparing the percent share for each language out of the total, we're seeing that Russian gains like 0.5 percentage point, Haitian, Italian, and Arabic lose roughly 0.5% share point out of the total. Yiddish, Polish, they gain 0.1 and 0.2, roughly 0.3 respectively.
This
And
is in
then-
the slide deck. This is in the slide.
It's in the slide deck,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Mhm.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Bengali and Urdu, for Bengali, the change is insignificant. Same for Urdu and French. While for Chinese, we have, so Chinese gains 0.35% out of the total. While Korean also is roughly at the same level as a percent share of the total of CVA LEPs or citizen of voting age with limited English proficiency in the jurisdictions that we provide services. So no, other than Russian gaining 0.5 point and Haitian, Italian, and Arabic losing roughly 0.5 point, I would say the others are not affected by the percent share, the change in CVA LEP and percent share.
So does anyone have any questions based on what we see on the screen, and in you should have a copy in your slides as well of the changes that we are making to the percent share for each language. And this is slide number 6.
I guess just
Yeah.
in simple terms, what are the implications of these changes? Like, how does that affect the work that we do?
Thank you. That's an important question. So
I can illustrate this.
sure.
So let's say this is the total of the universe makes of this language, CVA LEP for each language, it makes 100%. Let's say we're going to be able to provide services at 100 poll sites, right? So that means that for Russian, for example, it's gaining 0.5 point, right? From 38.7% out of the total, it's going to 39.2. When the data team process this and come up with the language, the poll sites, they round up the numbers. So for Russian, in this case, it would be 39. It would be the existing. It would be rounded to 39%. With a new change, again, we're going to have to round to 39%. So there's not much changing.
So that's out of 100, that
Out of
was
100.
39.
Yeah,
sites.
it'll get 39 poll sites, so no changes in real terms. I think for for, same for Haitian, I would say, because you have a 10% existing percent share, 9.6, we round up to 10, so it'll get 10 poll sites again. For Italian, it's losing half a percent point. So from 7.8, it's going to 7.3, so it's going to be rounded to 7. So Italian is going to get one less site in the upcoming election out of the 100 sites. So that's how it goes.
Yeah, so year to year, we may not see dramatic shifts. There will be some like here and there, you know.
Minor. Of course.
Anyone else? Questions on the shifts that we're making? We're
Were there any, like, these are the top languages, were there any interesting ones that come below it that are making their way up?
So we only focus on the program eligible languages and ACS data pertaining to those language communities. But if I recall correctly, Greek and Albanian are next, like under these, you know, they come next as like the languages with the highest percent share as a total of the population citywide.
Yeah, I ask because there's like new languages of folks who are now calling the city home and are on their way of not just legal status, but also then eligibility for citizenship and then moving that path. But I think it might still be too early to capture that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you're bringing that up because this methodology is very connected to the local law, LL 30, right?
Yeah.
And local law 30 also went through a process of communities, you know, advocating to be included in the list of 10 languages. And I'm not sure, like, if you want to say anything about potential future iterations of the local law, if you're aware of anything that would kind of potentially either expand the languages or change the languages.
Well, not yet.
On that part of the conversation.
I think eventually it'll have to be amended and expanded for voting purposes. The city should expand it for general purposes, but for voting purposes, it would not be a voting eligible population for the next 5 years.
Okay.
So between now and 5 years, we have time to.
Yeah, I mean, and it's also, I think, just helpful to remind ourselves that the reason why we're doing this program is actually to account for the demographic shifts that historically have happened in this city, because the Board of Elections does provide language assistance, and they are providing language assistance in a very important, you know, language citywide, Spanish, which CEC isn't doing. However, there have been shifts in other languages that are not languages that are not covered under the Voting Rights Act, and that's why we're here to kind of bridge that gap. So, yeah, so appreciate that. So, any other discussion points on the changes to the methodology resolution? Okay, well, can I hear a motion then to approve the methodology resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and if I could just ask the commissioners for the vote to unmute their microphones. I think you're doing that anyway, but all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay? Are there any abstentions? Okay, so the motion to approve the resolution is passes unanimously. Okay, now we are going to turn to the city's racial equity planning process. And to help us and members of the public better understand this process, we've invited our former colleague, Drashti Brahmbhatt, who we're really proud to claim as an alum of the Civic Engagement Commission. And I think, Drashti, you got started in city government at CEC, right?
Yes.
So that's great. So now at the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity and Justice, another office that was created by through a charter reform process, through a ballot measure, and Drashti is now Director of Equity Planning and Technical Assistance. So Drashti will present to us, and then we'll take some questions, answers from the group here, and then turn to the work the team has done to kind of work with this process. So Drashti, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Dr. Saeed. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see everyone again. Thank you so much for having me. So again, oh yeah, sorry. Okay, there we go. Forgot this time. But good afternoon, everyone. My name is Drashti Brahmbhatt. I use she, her pronouns. I'm at the Office of Equity and Racial Justice now as their Director of Equity Planning and Technical Assistance, leading up the racial equity planning process. Super excited to share a little bit about the process and where we're at, and then we'll of course pass it over to the CEC team to talk more specifically about CEC's racial equity plan. So I'll go ahead and get started with the slide deck. It'll be pretty brief. So just as a recap, at the Office of Equity and Racial Justice, we were created last October 2023. If you could just go back for 1 second. Great, yes. And so we house a couple of different offices, initiatives, and commissions. So the Commission on Gender Equity, NYC Her Future, the New York City Young Men's Initiative, NYC Unity Project, Task Force of Racial Inclusion and Equity, and the Pay Equity Cabinet. So we're fairly new, but a lot of the work has been pre-existing, just not all housed together. So on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the ballot measures. And everyone in the room is very familiar with ballot measures, of course, given CEC's founding. So I'll keep it brief, but in 2022, New Yorkers overwhelmingly voted and passed 3 historic ballot measures that really together embed racial equity in city government's infrastructure. So the first one is, and I'll go into these in just a second, but to be brief, the first one is a statement of values, which adds, for the first time, a preamble to our city's charter and really outlines the value and vision for a just and equitable city. The second, now we're moving on beyond our words, we're moving into the infrastructure to carry that out. So it created this racial equity office, which I just said was, launched in October 2023. It added language around the creation of racial equity plans by covered city agencies, and also created the Commission on Racial Equity Core, which is a separate public accountability partner. So while our office works with city agencies, Core works with the public to drive public engagement and drive their priorities into the planning process. So we kind of work hand in hand to build the plan and then track it. And then finally, I won't touch upon this a lot today, but the third ballot measure that passed was the True Cost of Living Measure, TCOL. And this is a new measure to calculate and track the actual cost of living in New York City. So that is underway, and hopefully we'll have some more updates in the coming months. But before I dive into really quickly the first 2 measures, I just want to say, these 3 historic ballot measures were really brought on by the work of the Racial Justice Commission, which was created and launched to get these ballot measures in the eyes in front of New Yorkers. And so they did a lot of public engagement work, and they have a beautiful report online that I'm happy to share the link to later that shows, who they've engaged and kind of the priorities that came about that process. As well as this kind of reckoning we had across New York City and across the country of the importance of this work and to institutionalize it. Great, so on the next slide, I'll just quickly go over the statement of values. And I've linked in the slideshow, but can share a link to share digitally later. It's a really short but powerful preamble that I would really advise everyone take a look at to read after the meeting. But to be brief, it's right at the beginning of the charter, and it kind of explains and gives this grounding to our work. And it goes over these 3 core foundational values throughout the passage. That one states, our government must, justly value all talents and contributions, that we must ensure the conditions of thriving for every person. These are North Stars that agencies should kind of take into mind as they build out their plans and their work. And then the third really critical component here is that our government embraces vigilance, remedy, and reconstruction. So in the plans of the agencies, there's this really strong component of recognizing historical harms and racial disparities in their line of work, whether it was intentional or not intentional, and whichever actor it was, whether city, state, federal, or other institutions and actors, right? And the ethos of that is really that we must recognize where we have been in order to be able to understand what is currently happening and to move forward. And so this preamble, although it's words, right, they're really powerful and they help city agencies keep in mind as they go about their planning and programs. So on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about now the planning process, right? So our office, MOERJ, leads the city's first citywide racial equity planning process. It hasn't been done before here in New York City. We do recognize a lot of city agencies and initiatives have embarked on their own equity planning processes and even particularly racial equity. And we definitely want to uplift that and help institutionalize it as a city, right? So when New Yorkers face inequities, they don't face it necessarily by silos, right? It all combines and compounds. And so we want to create a plan in which every single city agency all covered city agencies are required to create equity plans. There are a few that are not required, and we definitely invite them to participate, whether this cycle or in the following cycles. I just want to emphasize, it's not a compliance exercise, the plan. They really are meant to be transformative and address what we're calling core government levers, which are staffing, contracting, service delivery, and budgeting. And they are time bound. So we have goals for 2 years, 4 years, and 10 years, but it's a reiterative process. So it's not like we publish a plan and then we're done and we just wait until the completion of the specific goals, right? So every 2 years, we're back into the progress reporting and planning cycle. So in 2026, we'll report on progress of agencies' short-term goals, and we'll also go back and say, what has changed, right, in your agency? Have new needs come up that we need to kind of incorporate into the plan? Has more capacity developed or more infrastructure that we can kind of build into the plan? Or are there new thoughts that we might have, right, as we do more research and as our team kind of builds up as well? So on the next slide, I'll talk a little bit, and this is very, again, high-level framework and brief, and this is kind of detailed a little bit more in the charter language itself, which I can share, of course, after this. But, our foundational values is what's driving the framework, and we're looking, as I mentioned, in these core government levers. Usually the first 4 apply to almost every single agency, budgeting, service delivery, staffing, and contracting. Some agencies might have some land use equity components to consider. So we're asking agencies to develop these 3 sections of their plans. One is kind of their mission statement and commitment to racial equity that we're asking them to create, acknowledgement for the racial equity work and kind of what's driving the background of what they're going to be developing. The next component, which is a really, the meat of the plan, I would say, are developing the short, medium, and long-term goals, measurable outcomes for each of those goals. It's really critical in our plan that we have measurable outcomes that the public can kind of track and determine if an agency is actually completing a goal. Strategies which kind of explain the actions the agency will take to accomplish the outcome and thus the goal, and then performance indicators to kind of measure progress along the way. So, some goals have outcomes that aren't going to be accomplished until 4 or 10 years, but we want some indicators to measure what they've been doing since then that kind of add up in the very end to achieving that outcome. And then finally, we have the section on spotlight wins, where agencies can kind of take the space, if applicable, to showcase to the public what already work that they've been doing on equity and specifically racial equity. And the last slide I want to share today is just giving us kind of a timeline reference of what we've done and where we're going. So we kicked off the planning process in April with agency heads. The mayor sent out notifications. There was a meeting for commissioners, agency heads, and chiefs of staffs. And then we asked agencies to create a racial equity planning team, REP team, composed of between, depending on your agency size, 3 to 7 people across divisions to come together and lead the process for their agency. And so we invited those teams for a day-long training either in May or June. And there were some makeup trainings after that for some agencies who weren't able to attend. And so agencies began working on their first drafts in July. And after they submitted their first drafts, we were able to provide some inline feedback. And agencies went back and were revising and recalculating some of their plans. In September, agencies submitted their second drafts and received some final feedback on that. And so in October, when we received final, and when I say final, I mean preliminary drafts, we reviewed them and rolled them up to create a citywide plan. And just honing in on this word preliminary, so we're releasing a preliminary plan, right? And that plan then has 30 days for the Commission on Racial Equity to generate public feedback on. So public feedback through their variety of different ways that they've done already thus far to generate public feedback into the process. But so they'll have 30 days as well as their commissioners to give us feedback specifically on agency plans as well as holistically. We take that feedback back and we come back to agencies and keep working with you all to incorporate that as well as other feedback that might have come up between your own staff or other priorities, and leadership, et cetera, to inform the release of the final plan, which we're hoping in the first quarter of 2025. So the preliminary plan has not been released yet. Don't worry, but we're hoping to release it this month, pending review. So I think that's all I have for now. I'll just one caveat I'll say is that in the training of the agencies themselves, there's a lot more information covered about what we mean by equity and staffing and budgeting, et cetera. So I'm happy to elaborate on any of those if necessary, but I'll just end by saying that I'm very, very excited about CEC's plan. It was very, very detailed, and it really kind of embodies like the ethos of a lot of this work as well as the ballot measures. So really excited to hear feedback on it.
Thanks, Drashti. Does anyone have any questions on Drashti's presentation? I do have one myself, but no, you can go.
Hi, thank you for that. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, it's my understanding that city government is also going through a planning process relating at the agency level, relating to the Americans with Disabilities Act and a variety of ways in which that should inform agency work. Has there been any crossover or synergy between the racial equity component of making our city more responsive and the, I guess it's a more physical aspect of it, although I'm coming to learn that ADA requirements are much broader than just a ramp here and there. And so is there a crossover? Is there a space for a crossover?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. 2 components here. One component is that we really stress to agencies that this is a racial equity planning process, but intersectionality is critical to this component, right? So we encourage agencies to think more and incorporate different equity measures into this plan, whether it's on gender, whether it's disabilities, age, et cetera. So we really kind of, you will see in this plan a lot of folks talking and really drawing links between populations. So some agencies have already incorporated components of that. The second kind of answer to this question is that we have been working with a couple of different offices who have planning processes. So whether that's MOPD, whether that's the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, who are embarking their climate planning process right now. Of course, the Mayor's Office of Operations has their annual management report. And so we've been working with these offices, hopefully in the next planning cycle, to kind of see if there's synergies to combine planning and processes so we can kind of we're not, well, a couple of different things. We're not asking agencies to, you know, submit reports and indicators in 5 million places, but also for the public, right? And most critically for the public so that they can see processes combined together to serve them. We're still working on that. You know, we're really trying to focus first to get the infrastructure of the racial equity plan up and going. And then we're hoping to, as our team also expands, to be able to draw those parallels as well.
If I could follow up just briefly, I guess there's another aspect to it, hearing, responding to what you were just sharing. Agencies probably have limited bandwidth to, in terms of budget and staff power, and I'm going to bet you a good beer that the people you want involved in the racial equity planning process are probably the same people you want involved in the forward-thinking aspects with respect to some of the other aspects. So I'm hoping the timeline, and heaven forbid the budget, should align so that you get the right folks that you want involved in the creative aspects of making sure that the abstract concepts that are on the board translate into something meaningful for the folks who work at the agency, and then hopefully eventually for all New Yorkers. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's any hope for that there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, I feel like, well, two things. The racial equity goals that we've asked agencies to create, many of them are not necessarily goals that require new resources or staffing. As we think about racial equity, you know, there's often a misconception that it's always about new dollars or new resources, but also a critical component of it is examining where your current dollars are spent and determining where to reallocate if necessary, or to create specific barriers or like to dismantle specific barriers to those processes, whether it's your hiring processes, right? Or whether it's the technical assistance you might offer to your contractors or vendors in completing applications, et cetera. So there's that component. I think there are obviously some goals that do just simply require more funding or more staffing. And those are goals that are in the medium or long term so that there's more ability to kind of advocate for those specific needs. So in the plan, it's very clear which those goals are, because it might mention very specifically, like we will need to advocate for X, Y, and Z. Or that there are kind of approved staffing in the pipeline, but it isn't onboarded yet. So they kind of mention that specifically too.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up a little bit and ask you to explain why we're even having this conversation today and why it's important for the commissioners to vote on this decision. It relates to the charter language around what is an agency, what's a covered agency. And the resolution language alludes to it. If you could just be a little bit more specific as to what is the nature of the entity that is required to participate compared to the one that can opt in to participate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the charter has very specific language, and I don't have it pulled up yet, but we can if we need to, but there are covered agencies, right? So there's a few different things the charter mentions, but like size, for example, like the size of your employee base or the nature of your work. And so the Civic Engagement Commission is not a covered agency that is required to participate in the process, but we have invited to participate, similar to a few other offices that might appear in this year's plan. And so, you know, but I do want to emphasize that, you know, the civic engagement work, as you all are very familiar with, is really goes hand in hand with this type of work. And it's a really great way to institutionalize a lot of the goals that the commission already has and is trying to work towards. And so we're really looking forward to the CEC being in the plan, but it's, as Dr. Said mentions, it's not a requirement.
Yeah, thank you. And I can just share a little bit more in terms of this section of the charter does say that the commissions per se are not required or obligated to do this. It also says that it has a staff number cutoff, which is 40. It says anyone under 40 number 40 is not required to. And then it talks about the other option is that if there's a contracted it's like the number of the aggregate value of the contracts that are held by an office. And if the contract value exceeds 500 million, then it can opt in, I think. Right?
Yeah, I would have to double check. Yeah.
And also that if you can apply, you can literally apply in writing to participate in this process. Provided that the language says that you can also include in the resolution the option to kind of, ask for permission to withdraw from planning as well, depending on your capacity and needs. It says the agency that has agreed in writing to comply with some or all of the provisions of this chapter applicable to a covered agency, provided that such agreement may be revoked in writing at any time by such agency. So,
So they don't have, so an agency that voluntarily complies does not have to request permission to withdraw. It can just withdraw.
it can be revoked. It has to be revoked in writing.
Right, but it's by fiat. The agency decides. It isn't that they have to get permission to withdraw or revoke. They just revoke.
Thanks for clarifying. Yeah, and part of why this conversation even came to be is because it was for a different question that I had reached out, which was the CEC is required to hold public hearings. And there's supposed to be a public hearing about the plan and several public hearings, right? And I had the question of, if CEC has a racial equity plan, do we need to hold our own public hearing? Because we're supposed to do public hearings, or is our planning subsumed under this bigger citywide plan that then CORE will cover the public hearing for our portion of it, as well as other agencies' portion? And the question I got back from the law department was like, did you sign up to do that? So that's why we're having this conversation now, because we can't simply just submit a plan or fill out a form. And because of the way the charter is written, we just need to make sure that we are all in agreement that we're going to move forward with this.
We would need a vote from the commission to do that.
We're asking the commissioners to vote on the resolution. And before we get to that, we actually have a presentation going back to the CEC presentation. Oscar Romero, who's our Chief Information Officer and leading on this work of the planning, is going to present to you what CEC has been thinking about in terms of the plan. And if there are no other questions for Drashti, which it looks like there still is, so I'm turning over to you.
I think this is a quick question. Do you happen to know if the City Planning Commission has opted in?
The Department of Citywide Planning has, but not the commission.
But not the commission.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
But with some, there might just not have been. We didn't reach out to necessarily all who are not covered, right? I think CEC we reached out to, particularly with the tree work, right? So, but after this first year, we have 45 in the plan, 45 agencies or offices. So we're hoping that in the next year we can get a few more that were outliers and invite them to participate. But we really try to focus on the covered ones first.
Yeah. I mean, well, given that commission's position and determining so much of, that shapes the city, I think it might be fair to ask them.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Drashti.
Sorry, when is the plan being released? You said
We're hoping for December. There isn't a specific date yet.
Gotcha.
There it's just there are some reviews happening, but we're hoping this month.
Yeah, I think like some work that we can do together is, as they seek public feedback from the public, we can promote this also on our CEC social media channels and things like that. But I'm sure that's already being talked about, but just an idea.
So I'll stick around in case.
Yeah, thank you. Want to come up, Oscar?
Okay, well, now I'm going to move on to the part of the CEC's presentation. My name is Oscar Romero. I am the Chief Information Officer of the Civic Engagement Commission. And my job basically includes three pieces. On one end, I manage the digital infrastructure that powers all the work that we do. I also oversee impact assessment for the commission. So to the point of some of the commissioners, yes, I often find myself in a bunch of different spaces where we have to then figure out how do we align the goals of the commission with the different requirements and the new legislation. And ultimately, I create also positions for the Commission for the impact of the challenges for democracy in digital spaces. So, as you heard from Drashti, the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice tasked us to develop a racial equity plan in collaboration with Abby Walsack, our lead operations, Hayden John, the manager for the TRIE neighborhood initiative that we oversee, and myself. We took the job of developing this first draft of a racial equity plan. So the first piece that was asked of us, which I think it is fundamental and important to highlight, is to recognize the existing racial disparities and past harms that New Yorkers face along the lines of the work that we do. And it is to nobody's surprise in this forum, I believe, that the United States at large, and New York City in particular, have both a well-documented history of discrimination and segregation dating back to Jim Crow laws, disenfranchising of people of color, and limiting the rights to vote that continued even after the civil rights movement. Not only that, the consequences of New York City's history of redlining and segregation are reflected in the built environment, whether it is access to critical infrastructure, open spaces, health, and education. So that's why the work that the Commission does, that is anchored in strong community coalitions developed in the 33 neighborhoods hardest hit by COVID, identified by the Task Force for Racial Equity and Inclusion, is so critical to give voices to the New Yorkers who face a disproportionate hardship as a result of these historic inequalities that I described. So we decided to pick 3 issue areas that cut across all of our programming. And if we can go to the next slide, please. One of those, civic participation, voter accessibility, and capacity building. So we believe that one of the challenges here was to make sure that we anchored the goals that we were submitting for the racial equity plan with the outcomes of the Commission, but then create a bridge with the other goals that we have been developing, not only for accessibility purposes, but also in terms of privacy protections that the Commission does. So just to bring a couple of the select outcomes and how we are thinking of the language of the all-encompassing goals under which then all of these different commitments go. For the people's money, we believe that one of the goals is to increase agency among low-income and diverse New Yorkers to define priority challenges and strategies how to address them. Not only to get to say what are the issues that you should focus on, but how you should go about solving them, which we do through the people's money. Then also to increase the influence among low-income and diverse New Yorkers to decide how the funding is allocated. So not only you get to define the what and how and for whom and where, but you then also collectively, regardless of immigration status, as long as you're 11 years and older, you can then vote and decide which project gets to be funded to the people's money. Then in the side of the TRIE coalition work that we do, we are aiming to strengthen the ability of community-based organizations to improve the conditions of the people living in their neighborhoods through coalition building and through the work that they do as part of the Commission. For the community boards, we increase the technical capacity of community board members to carry out their duties. And for the VLA program, we increase the voter participation of low English proficiency individuals in elections. So we can go to the next slide, thank you. So one of the challenges, right, of developing this plan was to then create short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals that could be anchored in the things I described before. So happy to go in detail for any one of the goals, but I'll just go to the top for now. So the first one is to ensure that all CEC public-facing materials is accessible to diverse communities through and in plain language. So this both means in terms of language access, clarity, and cultural competency of the assets that we develop. The second goal is to develop culturally competent communication and outreach strategies that leverage the arts to engage with New Yorkers of diverse backgrounds. Understanding that, particularly in low-income communities, the New Yorkers that face different barriers on discrimination and inequality also distrust government in a variety of ways. Then the medium-term goals are to develop disaggregate data pipelines for all programmatic work so we can determine how we reach diverse communities and identify any potential disparities. A big part of being able to improve on our work is to be able to have baselines and measure it. The next medium-term goal is to increase the technical capacity of community board members to carry out their duties with a focus on reducing poverty, discrimination, and inequality. We constantly do capacity building programs. The opportunity here is to make sure that we bring the frameworks of racial equity and justice into every single program that we provide to community board members. The next one is to reduce language barriers for voters who need interpretation assistance in elections, to continue to increase and develop the BLA program. The fourth goal is to collaborate with other agencies and introduce strategies for them to both connect with our participatory budgeting programs and for them to also leverage all the lessons that we have learned, all the tools that we have developed to then run their own participatory programs too, and then make more opportunities for New Yorkers available for them to make decisions about how to allocate and define budgets. And in the long term, we want to make sure that as we deploy our budget, that goes to historically underserved neighborhoods, and we strengthen the civic infrastructure of community-based organizations that we work with. And lastly, we want to make sure that we increase the agency among low-income and diverse New Yorkers on how the city allocates funding on their community priorities. So now moving on to the next slide, the challenges. The next one, please. Next one. There you go. So as you mentioned, one of the challenges is a staff time. We constantly have, as new legislation is developed for great reasons, more objectives and more needs to then create plans, change culture. This is not only about doing research on finding out what are the best strategies, but also alignment. Sometimes it also comes with the development of new entire programmatic tools to be able to assess what we are now required to report on. And that becomes a capacity challenge. So our strategy is being to create an all-encompassing impact assessment framework that then we can plug into these different frameworks and continue to iteratively increase versus continues to develop different things that work in silos. It is the conclusion of this working group that we believe that the Commission should join the efforts of the Mayor's Office of Equity and Racial Justice and commit responsibly to achieving the goals presented by identifying and allocated resources needed to carry out the work. Happy to answer any questions you have.
I appreciate the plan, and I think the challenges are something that we should think about how we can support you in overcoming them with the increasing demands, but at the same time, increasing work across the board. And that was one thing that I kept asking myself in the previous presentation of like, how can the Commission do this with the limited budget, the limited staffing that you all have in this moment? So it's not a question of like, have you thought about what a staffing plan looks like for something like this? But that is something I think we should definitely look at down the road. And I make a motion to move it. So I also have to leave.
Oh, okay. Do you want us to move to the resolution because you have to leave? Okay. Is that okay? Does anyone else have a burning question for us in the planning we've done? So just moving to the resolution. Oh, anyone online? Did you have a question?
No
Or
questions.
maybe-
Thank you.
Okay, great. So the resolution relating to adoption of obligations under the Charter, Section 3403, begins by noting that the Section 3403 requires every covered agency to develop biennially a preliminary racial equity plan and an agency racial equity plan guided by the principles and values of equity as defined in the Charter, Section 3400, which will be incorporated into the plan. And then it talks about what is a covered agency. And we are resolving in this resolution to be a covered agency that is agreeing in writing to comply with some or all of the provisions of Chapter 78 of the Charter that are applicable to covered agencies that are required to do it. And provided that, as we just discussed, we can revoke in writing this agreement at any time. The Civic Engagement Commission, whereas the Civic Engagement Commission is committed to upholding and advancing the principles of values of racial equity enshrined in Chapter 78 of the Charter. And the resolution is that we are hereby agreeing to comply with the provisions of Section 3404 of the Charter that require agencies to develop a biennial plan preliminary agency racial equity plan and an agency racial equity plan once the preliminary passes into an actual one. So just opening it up for discussion or any feedback on this resolution before we move to vote on it. Yeah, and I also want to note that these resolutions are things that we can revisit also, right, and change as we go, because we're just getting started with the racial equity planning as a city. And CEC is just entering this space primarily, as was already mentioned, because it's already in alignment with things that we have been doing even before the Mayor's Office of Racial Equity Justice was officially created. Because we've been a member of the Task Force for Racial Inclusion and Equity since 2020. You know, I've been a member of that task force, and part of the work of that task force was to drive the Racial Equity Commission and to create this entity. So it's perfectly aligned with things we've already done, and it's kind of making it official that we're working on it. So that's how I'm seeing this resolution.
So I might move to accept the resolution.
So Donna, you made a move to approve the resolution. Is there a second?
I second.
Or thirded.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Please say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, great. So this resolution is unanimously passed by the members of the commission who are present relating to the adoption of obligations under Charter Section 3403 on racial equity planning. Thank you very much.
Apologies, I have to step
Murad's going to step away. Thank you. Thank you, Murad, for being here. Okay, in the next section of the meeting, we will go through program updates for you as we usually do. There's been a lot of activity that's happened in the past couple of weeks since we last met. And I am so proud of all of the incredible work that the staff has done. And I'm sure you are too, and will be too, as you hear the work that has happened. And it has been, you know, the team, as we all know, is, what's the right phrase? Small and mighty, right? Like in spite of our size, there have been such tremendous accomplishments. And I think staff have just done incredible work. So I wanted to make sure we're sharing that with you. And in the order of their presentations will be Anila talking about the Voter Language Assistance Program. JP will talk about some of the language access work that's happening. I will cover the community boards, and then Wendy will talk about the participatory budgeting program and also project implementation. And then Oscar will be talking about some new partnerships. And given that we started a little bit late and we are, you know, I want to try to stick to time in any case. So let's try to move through it in a way that is concise and yet digestible. We good? Okay, so Anila, the floor is yours.
Hi again. So I'm going to be talking about the Voter Language Assistance Program updates, the achievements we made for the November 2024 general election. As you all know, we provide services on the last 2 days of the early voting period. So for this past election, we provided services on November 2nd and 3rd. With Yiddish early voting services being provided November 1st and November 3rd. We also provided election voter assistance services, obviously, on Election Day, November 5th. We had a total of 77 staff members on the ground on November 2nd and 3rd, and 217 interpreters and 18 supervisors on Election Day deployed throughout New York City. In terms of the level of services for early voting, we provided a total of 40 language services at 22 unique poll sites throughout the city, with the majority of those services in Brooklyn. On election day, our interpreter teams were at 86 unique sites, providing services in a total of 97 language services. Next, you will see a map that shows the distribution of early voting services during the last 2 days of the early voting period. Again, as you can see, the majority of the poll sites covered are in Brooklyn, with a couple in Queens, one on Staten Island, and 2 in the Bronx. This is the election day services map, which we can see because of the sheer number of sites being much greater than for early voting. It's more equitable distribution throughout the city, but as we know, Brooklyn does have the largest concentration of voters with limited English proficiency that speak our program eligible languages. So again, major concentration in Brooklyn. In terms of utilization, we have a record number of voters assisted in this election. We're in the very final steps of the quality assurance process for the utilization data, but we're currently at a total of 2,199 voters assisted with language services, and 52 voters received general assistance, which was not language assistance. For early voting, we had 360 voters assisted. Russian, obviously, also because of the large number of poll sites covered with Russian. It has the largest utilization with 239 voters assisted. On election day, we had a greater number of voters assisted with language services. Obviously, we were providing services at a lot more poll sites. We have, again, Russian leading in terms of voter assistance on election day with 1,223 voters. And Italian has the smallest number of voters assisted with language services by only three voters assisted. In terms of voter language assistance marketing and outreach, we had in-language voter language assistance graphics running on Link NYC kiosks in poll site geographies, as well as on a private PSA network, well, nonprofit PSA network, I should say, run by FYI. We ran geo-targeted meta ads in language for a total of 3,000, reaching 74,000 unique social media users. The PSA also ran on Taxi TV, NYC Life, NYC Gov for free. We reached out to over 100 community-based organizations that work in poll site geographies, and we shared the digital toolkit, the multi-language digital toolkit that we produce for every election. CEC staff members held presentations on voter language assistance services and other CEC programs at 5 community board meetings. Also, we held 3 voter education forums in language. We had one with Polish-speaking seniors in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, one with Russian-speaking seniors in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, and one online with Arabic speakers. And we estimate that we had over 200 attendees, or we should say members of these 3 communities reached through these 3 events. In terms of the Language Assistance Advisory Committee, we continue to meet regularly. We meet on a monthly basis. They assisted with our outreach efforts. They supported the Polish, Russian, and voter education forums. They distributed palm cards and posters to organizations and businesses in Polsite geographies. They shared the voter language assistance multi-language toolkit to other contacts. They also prepared, 4 of them prepared in-language video messages for distribution on social media. These were for Russian, Mandarin, Urdu, and Italian. And a few of them sent out email blasts to over 20,000 recipients total, and also posted on their social media or in the social media accounts of the organizations they work for or run. In terms of the look ahead, we are this month, I should say, later this month, we are launching efforts to recruit for the new LAC cohort, and we're aiming to have the first meeting in late February or early March. We are starting to plan for the June 2025 primary in terms of outreach, advice, operational plan. We're also working internally to assess the feasibility for a new voter language assistance website, which ideally would have 11 language versions that are human translated. And we are also starting to look at ranked choice voting collateral to refresh and update in time for the June primary. Questions?
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Yeah.
So I understand it's can't be everywhere, but the market and outreach, I don't recall seeing it anywhere in Manhattan. The message is something that we always wanted to put out because the Board of Elections doesn't, even though it's evident that you can bring someone with you to the poll site, and I've always advocated for that. No one really gives that message out. And I see that we did, but I didn't see it anywhere, where it could help, at least in Manhattan.
I think that's a really fair question, Donna. And I think part of our tension here is that we're trying to market our services in the geographies where we have services. And as we saw on the map, a lot of the services are in particular geographies. And Manhattan, I don't know if we even had, maybe we had like 1 or 2. And I think that's kind of impacting where the advertising is going. And I think what we could be thinking about is, as we're planning marketing, particularly for ranked choice voting, right? To try to explore the option of doing this kind of outreach across the boroughs, because our message is general enough, or maybe finding a way to put out a general message of like, you have the right to vote in your language, and then specifically marketing to geographies where we're serving, like trying to explore both. I think the tension to me has really just been like trying to create an outreach plan, with a budget that also has to cover the actual interpretation services. So I think that, we could think about that internally. Anila, I don't know if you want to add anything as to how.
Yeah, I'd like to add that while we do not put money into advertising efforts for Manhattan residents, several of these strategies that we included here do cover Manhattan, like the FYI PSA network. Several of the organizations that are covered by their network, they are in Manhattan. So whoever went to get assistance at these community-based organizations that are part of the FYI PSA network, they did have a chance to view our graphics in English, Spanish, and Chinese. And also they were part of their so-called election clearinghouse. So we had multiple language versions on their website, along with messages and collateral from other organizations doing election-related work. So that's not exclusive to the geographies or jurisdictions that we cover with services, but to the entire New York City. Also, Link NYC kiosks, a lot of them are in the city, so the language version did run wherever possible in Link NYC kiosks throughout the city at some frequency, which I do not have right now. Also, Taxi TV, NYC Live, and NYC Gov, it does broadcast and reach Manhattan residents as well. But it's true, we do not have like a strategy to target Manhattan residents in particular to let them know of the right to vote in their language. Although our collateral does have that message that they have the right to bring an interpreter with them to the polls. And also on these particular dates, the CEC will be providing services at select poll sites.
Yeah, so let's explore that further. I think it's a good point. Okay, JP, do you want to come up and share about the language access across lanes? Thank you so much, Anila.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good to see you again. So I'm going to talk briefly about some updates we have for language access across all program lanes. So the first thing that we're going to do is have a training for new hires about language access at the CEC. We've had quite a few new hires, so we want to make sure that everyone is on the same page as to what the CEC does with language access, why it's important, how to get help if you need it, that sort of thing. It's going to cover Local Law 30, the differences between translation and interpretation, things like that. The next thing, I'm actually in the final stages of this step, but we are making a new form for requesting language services. So right now it's kind of been a bit ad hoc via email and difficult to track. So I have created an Airtable base that integrates both the project request and the invoicing together so that we can track everything by program lane, language, and have all the invoices integrated with that as well. So we are also going to be supporting the Borough Assembly committees for starting in January. We sometimes provide interpreters for participants as needed. Next slide, please. All right, so we are also in the beginning stages of creating the translation style guide, which is something that we mentioned during the language access plan. So we're aiming for a draft for mid-January, and then depending on the revisions and things like that, we'll have a final version shortly after that. We are also beginning work on the language access methodology for the People's Money. We're looking for a draft in mid-February. We're looking to also implement this with the voting phase beginning in 2025. So yeah, that's what we're working on. A lot of great things coming up, and we're excited to continue the great work of language access. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, JP. Any question? Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide on community boards. Benjamin, thank you for your hard work. Benjamin's here in the room, and I'm going to present for Benjamin. So we've had some really great workshops this in the winter, or in the fall, and coming up in the winter as well. So the upcoming workshops, starting as early as next week, I guess, include presentations from Department of Records, Housing, Preservation, Development. We're also doing a de-escalation training focusing on strengthening community board members' skills in conflict mediation. And this was at their request. They wanted to know specifically about how to de-escalate in meeting situations. Monitoring and evaluation training, and what we are also trying to do is kind of vary the in-person and online, because the conflict resolution or the de-escalation will be in person. And then also thinking about how to cater some workshops to boards' unique needs. right? So we'll be offering a limited number of individualized workshops and topics of interest, including parliamentary procedures, and the city budget, which will let more members of boards access the information than they. So if we did a training just for the board, that will let more members of that board join, in addition to holding, the trainings that are just open to citywide board members. So we're going to experiment with a different model of workshop delivery coming up. Are there any questions on the community board work? Good. Okay. Next we have the people's money. Wendy, roll.
Afternoon, commissioners. I will be providing an update on the status of the people's money, including where we are on project implementation, as well as the TRIE neighborhood initiative. Next slide. So just to ground us in where we are in our current cycle, you can see that we have, we're obviously in year 3, and we have completed the first phase of year 3. Our next phase, as mentioned previously, will begin in January, and that is the launch of our borough assembly process. Next slide. So phase 1 idea generation, the People's Money idea generation phase ran for 6 weeks from October 11th to November 24th. We worked with 170 community partners. That includes 28 TRIE partners, 46 tiers 1 to 3 partners, and by tiers 1 to 3, that includes partners who have citywide reach, partners who have a demographic focus to ensure we're meeting high priority populations, and partners who have reach in a specific borough. In addition, we tried something new this year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. We had 89 tier 4 partners, and these are partners who hosted sessions and were matched with community facilitators who we trained. We do have a partner debrief scheduled for December 11th. We're sharing in the deck, we're sharing the registration if anybody wants to join. That is a debrief where it's important, do we understand from the providers how things went, what were the challenges, what were the successes, and that is a very important aspect of our constant need to improve, to tweak, as we try and roll out new additions and new materials and new approaches based on the ongoing feedback received both from participants as well as from the providers that we work with. Next slide. So again, we funded 170 community partners to host in-person idea generation sessions in all 5 boroughs and in the TRIE neighborhoods. We held a total of 509 sessions citywide. 3,420 ideas were submitted. So we have our work cut out for us. We engaged 9,564 New Yorkers in the first phase of our idea generation process. And just noting that we're continuing to gather the data and crunch the data. So if these numbers change slightly, just noting that there may be some updates as we're still in process. In addition, we collected 3,499 surveys directly from participants. Obviously, that's important for us to understand what the participant experience has been. And we also collected 1,359 borough assembly applications. And from those applications, we make selections for the borough committees. We also had a 38% exit survey response rate, and we're still counting. Just sharing some feedback that we've received so far from our partners, that they are finding these sessions inspiring, the importance of being able to engage residents in this way, that it's strengthening the relationship that we have with the community, and part of that is the level of consistency to be able to do this year after year. And then always nice to hear that we're improving each year. And again, that is a big part of hearing from our providers and hearing from our partners and hearing from residents themselves. Next slide. So just a little bit more about this Tier 4 outreach approach. Again, this is something new that we tried this year. I think one of the challenges that we've had is to make sure that we can reach as many partners and get engage as much as we can. The challenge, of course, is always the capacity that organizations have to take on this work. To have the capacity to facilitate a session also means that we provide the training, we provide the materials and the resources, and that takes time. So we wanted to be able to allow folks to host who wanted to make sure that there was a session available for their community, but didn't have to facilitate. And so we directly trained 25 community facilitators and we deployed them. Next slide. So the targets that were set, I'm just noting that this is a team effort, including the outreach team, Barbara Williams, our outreach director, Benjamin Solitaire, senior advisor, Anthony Carillon, Catherine Gao, Samira Zaru, from our engagement specialist, as well as Dan Botting, who plays double duty in Staten Island for both PB coordinator and outreach. The goal was to recruit 75 organizations, including libraries to host one session. And some of those folks were paid and some folks were not necessarily paid. They just wanted to really make sure that they provided this opportunity to their community. And the goal was to hire 25 facilitators to run these sessions. So where did we land? We did lose 2 community facilitators, but we retained the majority. We retained 23 facilitators, exceeded the number of sessions we were hoping to host, 89 partners. 46 of those partners were nonprofits, 33 library branches. We had 2 city council members host, 4 adult centers, and 4 shelters, for a total of 102 sessions held. And so you can see here a comparison. Oh goodness, those numbers are hard to read. Year over year, from cycle 1 to cycle 2, by every measure, we increased the number of partnerships, workshops, participants, ideas, surveys, and back applications. Partners increased by 61%, and that's largely due to this new approach that we took to make it a very light lift for new partners to come in. We also see this as an onboarding opportunity for smaller organizations who may not instantly have the capacity, but they can have a sense of what it involves, and perhaps they'll apply for a tier next year that is a bit more intensive and that involves more sessions and that they may want to get trained. It also, again, enables us to go into library branches where they may not have the capacity. And it also enables us to bring more residents directly into our process and to build those leadership skills and to develop that partnership directly with residents.
I just want to make a note, Wendy, on the slides that we distributed by email, there were some, you might notice some math differences, so that we fixed that in here, and so we'll send you the updated deck as part of the meeting notice. The meeting summary.
Thank you for noticing that. And the biggest increase was idea submissions. We went from 1,943 ideas submitted last year to 3,429. That's a 76% increase, a 70% increase in partnerships, and again, an increase in all of these indicators. Our next steps, next phase again is the borough assemblies. We will vet those 3,429 ideas. We bundle them. We do tend to have ideas that may not be eligible, although we've been decreasing the number of ineligible ideas year over year. And part of that is developing resources that are easy to use, easily understandable, digestible, that walks people through what projects are eligible and what the types of examples that help folks ensure that those ideas are eligible. And our borough assemblies will kick off January 21st. We're also really happy to see that the borough application numbers continue to increase. That's really important because the more applications we have, the more likely it is that we will reach a representative sample of the borough. TRIE Neighborhood Initiative. In addition to the TRIEs being a core partner to us in these high priority communities in running the participatory budgeting process, we are also, coalition building is really key to this work. They are, again, they're building and maintaining local coalitions, and they are facilitating as well a civic engagement workshop that the team has been working really hard to create. And we'll be working with organizations to allow them to customize that workshop to make sure it's relevant to the audience, to make sure it speaks to the audience and is relevant to their communities. We do still have 2 gaps, unfortunately, the Lower East Side and Fordham in University Heights. We're still actively recruiting to fill those gaps. Although I will say that we ensured that we were able to provide those idea generation sessions, so folks in those communities could participate through the other tiered partnerships and libraries. Coalition highlight, since October, partners have led 32 coalition meetings with their neighborhood stakeholders to raise awareness about the people's money, strategize ways to get community members involved, exchange resources and information at local events. And the other thing that's new is that we are pairing and connecting our implementing partners with the TRIE organizations and prioritizing implementation of the projects in those TRIE neighborhoods to ensure that there's conversations happening and they're communicating and collaborating on the implementation of projects in the TRIE neighborhoods to strengthen program delivery. Next slide. Again, for the civic engagement workshop, the goals are to define civic engagement. What is civic engagement? What's the relationship between concepts of power, love? I think that's the next word. Yes. Lost my slide. Justice. There we go. Page 24. Wonderful. Seeing examples of different types of civic action and learning about opportunities. The deck again includes customizable modules on topics such as advocacy and organizing, community boards, voting, volunteering, and partners are going to be trained on the workshop content later this month and will facilitate them in the spring. Also noting that we created 4 short video clips on different that accompany the modules, understanding that having seeing people talk about engagement in their own words is a really powerful way to inspire people and to connect to people and for people to see folks from their own communities sharing their experience. Capacity building ongoing. We do require our TRIE organizations to we tend to incorporate our capacity building trainings into our monthly meetings. We've also been offering additional capacity building trainings outside of the monthly meetings. The last training we offered was equity data mapping with Equity NYC. And astonishingly, we had, I think, 34 participants come, which was really wonderful to see. It was really engaging. They found it really helpful, just really providing that as a resource. How can it be used? How it can be helpful? And they were really, it was fantastic. Equity NYC did a fantastic job. We're also going to be providing a monitoring and evaluation workshop with our partner, Mark Johnson from the New School, who is providing a curriculum for our project, for our folks, organizations who are our implementation partners. Moving on to implementation. We did share with you all in a previous meeting the winning projects. However, we'll give you an update on we matched the number of votes in the TRIE neighborhoods for those projects to the projects themselves to ensure that we're prioritizing implementation in the TRIE neighborhoods. The impact areas include health and well-being, accessibility meaning making sure residents have access to resources in their community, and connecting them to resources, career development, education, public safety, and arts and culture. And health and well-being consistently being generally the largest category of projects selected. Next slide. The winning projects in Brooklyn include Life Prep for high school students. That was the top project voted by Bedford-Stuyvesant, so that's where it will be implemented. Language and job certification information for immigrants that will be implemented in Sunset Park. Errands for older adults and people with disability will be implemented in Coney Island and Brighton Beach. Path to Success And Money Habits, Brownsville, East New York, Starrett City, Cypress Hills, and Bushwick, and Home Repair Liaisons for Older Adults in Flatbush, Canarsie, and East Flatbush. Each of those projects will be funded at $200,000. In Queens, Healthy Meals Partnership. We have quite a few tree neighborhoods who voted for that project, so you'll see that rather long list, including Richmond Hill, Bethlehem Park, Jamaica, South Jamaica. Youth Empowerment, After School Workshops in Rockaway and Broad Channel, Connection Resource Center in Briarwood and Woodhaven. Building the Skills Gap Job Training for High Schoolers in Queensbridge, Connectivity Program for Seniors, East Helmers, and Corona for $170,000 each. Moving on to the Bronx, job training for young adults in trade work in Morrisania, Crotona, Mont Haven, Melrose, Hunts Point, Longwood, college prep and career readiness for youth in Williamsbridge, Norwich, Kingsbridge, Kintrix Heights, Bedford Park, creative mental wellness programs for families with children in the Belmont, East Tremont, Fordham University Heights area, slashing hunger and boosting knowledge about healthy eating in Highbridge Concourse, Mount Eden, and youth activity enrichment programs for the arts in Soundview, Classen Point, Castle Hill, and Unionport for $174,000 each.
Wendy, just in the interest of time, could you just maybe jump ahead a little bit? Because we do have the orgs.
Yes, absolutely.
Projects posted on the Participate platform. So if you could cover, please, the implementation timeline, as well as the capacity building workshops and curriculum, that would be really helpful. So then we can move to the section on new partnerships and then hopefully get the person who wanted to make a public comment if they're on the call.
Great, sounds good.
Thank you.
Yes, you can see the Manhattan and Staten Island projects online. For the implementation timeline, right now we're in project planning phase. That runs from September 24th to December. That's where they conduct a needs assessment, they create a logical framework, pre-post survey design, and then they're going into project implementation in December. And project reporting, there will be a mid-project report as well as a final impact report. You can also see the implementing partners on slide 28. I won't read them off. But we do have a number of returning partners. Either they were tree partners, they were partners who have implemented in the past, and then we have quite a few new partners who were selected. Our capacity.
Sorry, can I jump in for a quick question there? Thank you. On the timeline, I'm a little bit confused because I thought this was the current cycle was relating to fiscal year 26, which would start next July, but it appears that some of these projects are actually starting now-ish. Is this fiscal 26? Is it fiscal 25?
So these are the projects that were selected last year that get implemented this year. So they hit once they're selected, they basically hit the ground running. So we know what projects have been selected by New Yorkers by around June.
Right.
And then over the summer, we're selecting the providers and then begin implementation.
Okay, so then I guess the question is, one of the project implementation dates goes through October of 25, which would be past the fiscal year. Is that something that we're allowed to do?
Yes.
Okay, and how generally speaking, when city budgets work, you have to have everything delivered and done by June 30th.
We've worked with OMB to align the funding essentially to cover 2 fiscal years.
Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, just realistically, that is to ramp up a project of that size, it takes a little longer.
Oh, don't I know it?
So, yeah. So OMB has been working with us to work that out. Capacity building.
Who you're working with there, because I want to talk to them too.
I mean, it's not to say that they're allowing us to roll the money over. It's more how we budget the money from one year to the next, and happy to talk offline about the mechanisms to do that. Capacity building workshops, just noting that we have a very heavy emphasis and a requirement for all of the implementing partners to participate in curriculum building, a curriculum around monitoring and evaluation. Explain to everybody, this is a public facing process. And we are accountable to all the New Yorkers who voted on this process to understand what the outcomes were, what were the successes, and to know kind of where they are. And I'll also note that we will be working on issuing a report from year one. We're currently reviewing all of the 46 reports that were submitted from the first cycle. And so we'll be working to get that out the door. In incorporating the lessons learned from our first cycle for sure in how we're managing the curriculum. And there's some improvements that we've made based on those lessons learned. For one, we do have fewer projects this year. And that does mean we could beef up this level of support. We have some student assistants working one-on-one, and we're able to do that more one-on-one and provide more individualized support. And then we did add a stakeholder mapping exercise as an assignment. And then we added more workshops, in part based on feedback that we received, that they wanted to use those sessions to get feedback on their deliverables and on the process and use it as a working session. And so they're using both learning and doing the thing in those sessions, and people are finding that extremely helpful. And Mark Johnson has said these are the best logical frameworks that he's ever seen in terms of really understanding that the outcomes are aligned with what they say they're going to do or what they want to do. Is there any more slides?
I think that's the
At the end.
Yeah.
Okay, so
are there
accurate.
any
Thank you for your
questions on
patience.
the TV program, participatory budgeting program? Oscar, I'd invite you to come up then and talk about the new partnerships super quick. Thank you, Wendy. That was a long section. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, one last thing I think worthy of mentioning is that one of the key improvements is that now the organizations are getting the capacity building training before they go into implementation. So they have a chance to move from the proposal that they make when they are trying to get the grant, which, as you might imagine, is not all the work that they need to do to plan, to transform it into an implementable project with the support of the partnership with the new school. So that's a perfect segue into the different partnerships that we have been working on to support our work. As you all know, we use the CEC, which is an open source platform that was co-developed by the government of Barcelona to create a digital space to do participatory engagement that was owned by states versus private companies, right? So then the privacy, the information, the data could be managed by the states and by the regulations and was not going to be subject to change under any random new desire of private interests. So the benefit of an open source software is that when other people get to work on that, other governments invest on it, then all the people in the network, all the governments that use it can benefit from those investments. They still need to implement it, but they don't have to fund the development anymore. So one of the amazing outcomes of being part of this is that the federal government of Brazil has been looking up to our platform to then design their version of a participatory process called Brazil Participativo that they deployed across the entire country. Unlike us, that we use this participatory process to develop concrete projects that are to be implemented in the next year, what the federal Brazilian government is doing is using this platform to understand people's issues and then inform policy and planning, and then budget distributions across federal agencies and all the way down to municipalities. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development created an opportunity called Gov2Gov Challenge, which was basically an international cooperation space. They received about 70 applications from 25 countries, and Brazil's was one of the 4 applications that was selected. Basically, countries said, hey, we have this challenge. We're looking into how other governments could come and help us with strategies that we could learn from and implement. So the challenge that Brazil presents is, how can we ensure meaningful participation beyond tokenistic engagement of marginalized communities? And how can we overcome geographic and social barriers to reach out and engage people in marginalized communities? So we submitted an application to this challenge, presenting the work that we have been doing with our community engagement partners on the ground. And we were selected alongside the Greater London Authority to be then part of a series of engagements over a period of 6 months mediated by the OCDE, where we're basically sharing the best practices that we do on how we manage and support community networks. The Greater London Authority is sharing their best practices for digital engagement. And so what that space now has become is an opportunity for us to learn from not only the Brazilian government, but also the Greater London Authority. And the great opportunity here is to create basically a series of baselines on this is how you take participatory processes at scale, mostly in person, run by community-based organizations to create concrete projects. This is how you do it at a higher level at the federal government and in the context of promoting policy recommendations, and hopefully the lessons that we learn from that can help us promote and advocate for more participatory processes in the city, both at the state, the local, state, and federal level, with the respective representatives. So that's the work. We are now getting to session 3. There will be another 3 sessions, and the OCD will be publishing reports on the lessons learned. Yeah, happy to answer questions about the partnership.
You want to say anything else about the other partnerships? Is the person, by the way, online to do the public comment or? Okay, so right after you're finished, if you have any additions to the new partnerships, I don't know if you want to talk about anything else.
Yes, the only other piece I wanted to highlight were the academic partnerships. We basically have 3 tracks for engagement so far with 3 different institutions. One is with the new school, where we're doing the capacity building workshops. It has grown. Now students are getting better stipends. We are also working with the new school to see if there's opportunities for us to get tuition retributions to the students that participate in the program to make it even more accessible. The second partnership that we have is with Cornell Tech, with the Public Interest Technology Department, that brings PhD students to do data analysis. A lot of the lessons that we're discussing with the Brazilian government came from that partnership with the Public Interest Technology Department at Cornell Tech. And then finally, we are working with the NYU GovLab on producing a series of briefs on how do you define trust in democracy for the context of local government, so then we can create complete indicators that we can make the commission accountable to, as we are supposed to increase trust as per the charter mandates.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Oscar, for that. Any questions on any of this? That's a lot of work happening, exciting work happening, and you know, we are all becoming more present on like different stages where civic engagements being discussed. I also had the opportunity to attend what's called a civic collaboratory in Washington, D.C. that brought together a lot of different nonprofits, government, even private sector folks who are thinking about civic engagement. So that was very enriching and rewarding to be in that kind of space and to contribute and also to gain from it. So it's great to be doing this work. So as we are coming to the end, and I'm sorry to have made the person who signed up for public comment in advance of this meeting, Peter Keskinen, to wait until this moment. And we're so grateful for your patience to hang in there. And so we're going to call on you to please make your public comment to the Civic Engagement Commission.
All right, can you hear me and everything?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for hosting this meeting and allowing me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Peter Keskinen, and I'm a concerned student at the City University of New York. My background is in public health and the environmental sciences. I am particularly interested in food insecurity for vulnerable populations. I'm here today to advocate for Bill 0536-2024, which aims to simultaneously address food waste and food insecurity in our city. Bill 0536 would require certain retail food stores to post notices on a food donation web portal concerning the availability of excess food, and it would require said food retailers to arrange for the transportation and retrieval of such food to the food banks. Food waste and food insecurity are 2 of the most pressing problems facing our community. Over 13% of New York City residents face food insecurity every day, while we simultaneously discard 4 million tons of food in New York City every year. If just 5% of this excess food were donated instead of thrown out, then food banks could see their food supply increase by an average of up to 40%. Food insecurity is generally pervasive, but it affects minority communities at a disproportionate rate. Unfortunately, while enough food is being produced to feed the hungry people of New York City, not enough is being done to ensure those who need food assistance have the support to get the resources they need. There are many great organizations like Food Bank for NYC that do great work to help feed the food insecure. However, they are unfortunately insufficient at addressing the problem alone. At the same time, many food retailers produce excess food that ends up being thrown out and wasted even when it is suitable for consumption. Bill 0536 would aid in alleviating the burden felt by millions of New Yorkers. A multifaceted approach is required to effectively address these issues. That is why I respectfully urge you to support Bill 0536 to help those who are food insecure and reduce the magnitude of food waste in our city. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Keskinen, for that comment. Does anyone have any questions or responses to that?
I too have a question for Peter Keskinen, if I may.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Peter, thank you so much for that presentation of your concerns and for your public ask of support. I am interested as a commissioner to know if your choice of engaging this with the Civic Engagement Commission was in the hopes that the public that is tuning in might have an awareness and a shared concern. If you felt that we as a commission could do something to raise the issue, I'd like to know your specific target, and if it's just that you're making your presentation in front of as many city commissions as possible to increase the success of this, that's okay too. So I'd just like to hear from you if you picked us specifically for a reason I'm not thinking of or something else. Thank you.
I am trying to just kind of do it as to spread the word as much as possible and just get the word out there. So anyone who's tuning in can hear, like I said, it's like a multifaceted thing where we have people working, like, anyone listening could volunteer and then things like that. So just kind of trying to get the word out and trying to raise awareness and get people to participate in any way possible.
Well, thank you so much for bringing it in front of the public and for caring about this issue so much and having us hear you and share concerns with you.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Mark?
Thank you. As somebody who was the founding member of a group called the, did we lose Peter?
Oh, no, I'm still here. Sorry. I'm just moving my cat.
No worries. I was a founding member of something called the Midnight Marauders, who on our own nickel would rent cars, go to Whole Foods and bring the food back to a food bank. I'm concerned about while you were speaking, of course, I was completely ignorant of this great idea. So I called up the bill. The thing that concerns me is that it has a mandate, a requirement that the food store pay for the transportation of the excess food to the appropriate food bank. And from my own experience, I know that that is not an insignificant cost. How do we not discourage the production and sharing of food because of the imposition of that cost? Or is there a companion bill that would pay for the requirement that's put forward here?
I think the idea is to put the onus on a lot of the food retailers. There are small food retailers like bodegas are completely not affected by this bill. This is for food retailers. I don't know the square footage, but they have to, meet a certain requirement to be affected by this bill. So it shouldn't affect small businesses that couldn't afford this as much, and it's more targeted at chains that aren't doing their part.
Thanks.
Of course.
I thank you so much, Peter, for that. I also want to thank you for taking the time to come and share this information with us. And, we as a commission in our public meetings, we are not required to have a comment period. It's, we could, but we're not required to do it. And so we opted to create a space for members of the public to come and speak to us. So, there's an echo, maybe that's because of me. Oh, can everyone mute themselves so there's no echo? But what I want to say that I'm really excited that you came, Peter, and that your cat came with you. That's really cool. I think this is our first cat participation.
That's so good to hear.
Meeting. So that's really exciting, and thank you so much again. I will definitely be looking up this information and sharing it with others I know who may want to get behind this. So thanks again for bringing it to our attention.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Again, move your cat when you're doing public testimony. I think it just boosts the issue. And Dr. Saeed, you have had cats present. You just didn't see them, just saying. Okay.
A great like graphic image is coming to mind. We gotta let our communications public affairs director know about it. Okay, so we are at time for the meeting. So does anyone else have any comments or questions or thoughts? Yeah.
I'll just say that I had the opportunity to go to an idea generating session last month, and it was great. I think I want to echo the comments that we saw on the slides about just being able to meet other people, participate in a way that you feel you're raising your voice and making a difference. I was just there to kind of watch, and it was an awesome experience. And I got to talk to folks from different backgrounds. One was experiencing a little bit of like housing insecurity. Another one was a recently arrived mother. And so it's just a nice space for getting to know your own community. So just want to shout out for that. And then looking forward to the assembly meetings. I don't think, is it possible to just attend even just to watch, even if we're not actually? Okay, perfect. Cool. All right, sounds good. Yeah, just plugging in that. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, we can also share information about the partner debrief for commissioners if they want to come.
I'm going to make a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Alistair?
Yes. Any someone like to second?
Second.
Okay, the motion to adjourn has been seconded, and all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes, and we are calling this meeting to adjourn. We will see you again in about 2 months.
So a happy new year to everyone.
Happy New Year, everybody, in advance. Thank you.
Take care.